Welcome to VADA Live. I'm your host, Dan Carrigan, back with an expert panel, and we're here to talk about July 1st. It's a huge milestone for the state of Virginia, and it's regarding when the new warranty, recall, and reimbursement protections go into effect. And speaking of that panel, I'm joined here today by Gambardella, who is General Counsel and Executive Vice President of VADA, and then the crew from Armatus dealer Uplift. Jordan Jankowski is Chief Operating Officer. Ryan Hammer is Operations Director at Armatus, and they are an endorsed VADA program partner. All three of you, welcome back to VADA Live.
Thanks for having us, Dan. Thanks, Dan.
And Ann, if you don't mind kicking us off as a bit of a refresher as to what these new warranty and reimbursement protections are, what they mean, and really why is this such a big deal for Virginia dealers?
Yeah, sure thing. The biggest piece of this bill goes to how you determine your retail reimbursement under the statute. Previously, the statute said you would get your retail reimbursement as determined by your 100 repair orders unless that amount was not reasonable. We had found that what manufacturers were doing was simply saying, you're not reasonable because somebody else is cheaper. Now, keep in mind, and this is one of the things we argued to our legislators, is that they were also setting those comparison rates. So if you were being compared to another dealer of your line make, that franchisor artificially would set that person's reimbursement lower. So it really was a way to ensure some additional fairness, some additional objectivity when you are determining your retail rate under the statute. This is a big deal. It's something that we had to fight, tooth and nail for. It was critical that we laid the groundwork that we laid of going out into dealerships and talking to everyone from the dealer to the general manager, to the service manager, to the techs, to the service writers, to the warranty clerks. I mean, we sort of covered the waterfront as far as what are the pain points in this area for you. And one of the ones we heard the most was, we never get what we submit under our 100 repair orders because they always say that somebody else is cheaper. The bill also addressed some manipulation with recall parts, not being able to artificially reduce those part prices when a part becomes subject to a recall, allowing you to return some of those recall parts. And then I know we're going to talk a little bit more about diagnostic time and rental cars as well. So enhancing some protections that were in the statute to begin with, adding some new. What we try to do is we try to be very surgical in what we do. We try to go in with specific, issues that are very, very critical to dealers and really make a difference for them. And I think that's what we've achieved with this bill.
And noting July 1, what should dealers be doing now to get ready for that date?
Well, I mean, I think that what they should do is look at their own reimbursements and figure out if they are where they're comfortable. If they want to go about doing a warranty increase request, there's nothing that changes about the process of how you do that with the 100 repair orders. It'll just be a little different reaction or a little different tools for the manufacturer to artificially reduce those. But yeah, so again, it may be that the dealer says, yeah, I'm comfortable with where I am, or I'm about where I need to be, or, oh gosh, it's been a while and I want to go through this again. They can certainly, it's something they can certainly do on their own, but obviously our friends at Armatus can help them out as well to sort of go through that process and make sure they're putting their best foot forward and making their best case as to what their retail reimbursement amounts are.
And Ryan and Jordan, turning to the Armatus side of things, nationally, what do you see or encounter with dealers when there's a similar situation as we're encountering in Virginia right now?
So, Dan, there's a lot of legislation going on right now across the country on this topic specifically, which is the reasonable language. And for all the reasons Ann articulated, it hasn't allowed dealers in many cases to get their true retail rates, what they're actually charging the customers. So dealers have a decision to make at this point. So they can wait till July 1 to submit. Some may want to submit now. There are manufacturers who historically have honored the law the way that it was written prior and the intent of what that law was prior. So some dealers may say, I'm going to submit right now because my manufacturer doesn't take advantage of that current language that's still in the law till July 1st. And some dealers definitely need to wait based on that prior behavior. And as Ann said, some dealers may say, I'm in a good place right now. I don't need to submit on July 1st at all. So it's really a different game plan. It's largely dependent on what brands the dealer represents and when the last time they submitted was. Keep in mind, one thing that's important, they should look at parts and labor. Sometimes the parts side was really hot years ago. Everyone focuses on an annual labor rate submission, but they should also be looking at parts pricing and see if they should be submitting for additional parts markup as well.
And this may be an oversimplifying question, but what are just some ways, and really from the dealer perspective, ensuring that a manufacturer now can't just deny a properly submitted request? How does that play out now? Any insight there to some that may be asking that question right now?
I'll take that one, Dan. I mean, this will, Ann alluded to this, but there were responses coming back from manufacturers that had quite literally no justification whatsoever. They would say, we're going to deny your rate. You asked for $10 an hour. We're going to give you $2. And the reason we're going to give you $2 is because your neighbor is only $2 higher than yours. But the neighbor also had their rate reduced. So it's quite literally controlling the rate in those cases. So this will now force the dealers to provide a substantive response to look at the work and say, look, if we're going to reduce your rate or decline your submission, then we're going to have to point to the quality of the work, not an arbitrary word like reasonable. So luckily with this new language, that's going to clarify how the manufacturer needs to respond to this, and that they're going to use the quality of the work to determine what the rate should be.
Hearing you there, and getting to either the ramp up to July 1 or after everything goes into effect, what are some common mistakes that you've seen dealers make at this time?
Yeah, Dan, I think one of the biggest things is time. Handling this internally, as Ann mentioned, dealers can obviously do, but taking key personnel out of the store, away from their core duties, can severely cost them. And time again, we see these in-house submissions taking 30, 60, 90 plus days to submit. And so you have all that time spent on the submission means it's taking time away from their day-to-day responsibilities at the store. As a result of that, many dealers, they're not submitting every year on the very first day that they're eligible. And it's ultimately costing them profit at the retail reimbursement rates that they're entitled to. A lot of times we see dealers who tell us they have it handled. They just kick the can down the road because of day-to-day operations at the store and the time that it takes to complete the submission, and they never end up submitting. So they might be sitting on a lot of profit that they're losing day in and day out. Something else we see, common mistake, is the submission package itself, right? So Jordan talked about the quality of the submission, where not all the documentation or files that respective manufacturer requires to be part of the process are submitted, ultimately leading to a reduction or even a denial.
And Ann, know a lot of work went into us even getting to this point in the state legislature this year. Would love to know, what part about this are you most proud of?
I think this is a great example of how we really did our homework, but we also made it a team effort. We had lots of dealers making lots of contacts to their legislators. Our Dealer Day on the Hill event that Armatus joined us for, we had techs down there telling their story to legislators. It was important that the legislators could see the real impact that this legislation would have to real people in their districts. It's you talk about these things in the abstract, but when the guy or gal that's actually turning the wrench comes in and says, "This will make a difference in my life," that's a very powerful thing. So we really appreciate our grassroots. We're going to work on growing that whole sort of system within our association family to make sure we're always there with those stories to really drive home that these are oftentimes the biggest small businesses in town. They've been there for generations in a lot of respects, and they bring a lot of value to their communities. And this is one way the legislators can help them continue to offer the opportunity that this industry has offered to so many people in so many communities across the Commonwealth and the United States, truly. So, not to be too lofty about it or need some patriotic music in the background, but it truly is one of those instances where this is going to mean dollars to Virginia businesses. It truly is. It truly is.
Really appreciate that insight, Ann. And Ryan and Jordan, understand that Armatus somewhat recently helped a Virginia group recover $1.2 million over that. We love examples and case studies at VADA Live. Can you walk us through what made that possible? Maybe any lessons that can be learned throughout that?
Yeah, Dan, we have two examples recently. We put out a vendor challenge where we said we'd check anyone's work to make sure that their rates are where they should be. And as you mentioned, we found some significant gross profit for the dealer. And I think the lesson that I would take away without sounding self-serving is check your vendors. So in this arena, it's hard to determine whether you're having a good result or a bad result, because if you're outsourcing the work, you're doing it yourself, and you're getting an approval, you may think, well, I gained money, I've done what I've needed to do this round, and we move on to the next year. The reality is there's typically a lot of money that can be left on the table for some processes that are not in favor of the dealer, right? So you have to put together the understanding of the state law and the manufacturer rules, and then you have to do the process quickly and accurately. Those three pillars kind of put the whole package together for a dealer. And there's some claims out there by vendors that I think should be probably checked by each dealership, that if they're telling you that they're going to help you with this process, take care of the whole thing for you, submit your actual best sample that will get you your best retail rate, that you ask them how they're going about accomplishing that. In this case that you referenced, it was just simply that when we went in there, that's what their data supported. So they had been leaving money on the table for many years. They've been submitting every year for parts and labor, and we were happy to help them. And we become good professional friends now with that group.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, you kindly kicked us off to one section of this segment we wanted to get to and take a little bit of a dive regarding diagnostic time and rental car reimbursement. What's the future there?
Yeah, again, some very precise changes that we made that we think will make a big difference. Diagnostic time, there was always the coverage for diagnostic work. But this just puts in explicitly in the code that includes any time that a technician is spending communicating with their manufacturer about trying to find a solution to a repair issue. We heard from numerous dealerships that this has become a problem. As these cars have gotten more and more advanced, dealers have said, and their techs have said, look, we feel more like we're troubleshooting their new technology for them, and we're not getting paid for it. And this is just not a matter of, waiting for a response from them and going to work on the next car. No, it's in the bay. You're not moving them in and out, particularly if they're electric vehicles that aren't working. Those are heavy and hard to be around. So that was just put it in there specifically to provide some additional ammunition, if you will, another arrow in the quiver. And then rental cars, that's one issue that is unique, but it's also really can really have an impact. So dealers are more and more likely being asked by their manufacturer to provide substitute transportation for customers whose vehicles are in their repair facilities for warranty and recall repairs. Now, our statute speaks to rentals. It doesn't really cover the loaner situation, and that may be, a battle for another day. But as far as rental goes, a couple of years ago, we put in a statute that says you've got to pay whatever the rental charge is. If Enterprise is charging you $32 a day, you can't pay them $28 a day. Now, the manufacturers are routinely violating that now. But rather than add on to that, we took another approach as well. These repairs are taking an awfully long time. And so what our code now says is that you can apply for that rental reimbursement within 30 days of incurring that expense as the dealer versus waiting 8 months for the repair to get done and then getting reimbursed for all that rental. So it's a cash flow issue, but it'll be important. And then it also prevents the manufacturer from refusing to pay for a rental because the dealer was unable to rent a vehicle of a specific size or even a specific brand. The dealer doesn't control what inventory is available in the rental market. So just because a manufacturer says you got to rent them an SUV or you got to rent them a vehicle of our line make, that's not a reason to deny the rental claim. So I think those are two things that'll be really important to dealers, both in cash flow and then just having the opportunity to make the argument that they need to be reimbursed properly under that statute.
Really appreciate you laying that out, Ann. And just an interesting question. Perhaps there's some nuance here, but it's regarding multi-store groups and implementation. Is there anything that varies there, or maybe any tips on consistency across rooftops?
I may turn that over to Jordan and Ryan too, but because this is more about individual franchises, it's not so much a dealer group specifically. Now, Jordan and Ryan can speak to, a dealer that might have a bunch of the same franchises in different locations and how they handle that, if there's any difference. The code doesn't really treat it any differently, but practically there may be.
Right, absolutely. So, as Ann mentioned, the submission process itself is the same, Dan. But for groups, medium, larger size groups with multi-brands, it really comes down to your manufacturer rules, what's written in their policies and procedures manual, and then how they're going to interpret the law. Jordan talked about the quality of the submission, and so every manufacturer has their own set of rules. Their interpretations vary, and so knowing how they're going to interpret what you put in front of them with that $100 sample and those nuances, it becomes very important. So when you have 3, 4, 5 plus brands in your group, you need to make sure that you're submitting in accordance with how your manufacturer wants that package to be received, so you can receive the reimbursement that you're entitled to. Additionally, every store in the group most likely is going to have a different annual rate anniversary date. It's going to be different throughout the year. So implementing a strong game plan around when to start the process and when to submit is going to be absolutely critical, so that way you're not costing the group profit.
First steps for somebody interested in just diving in, implementing, or preparing, what would this group recommend?
I'd say, Dan, again, depends on when the dealer intends to submit, but if they want to be ready for July 1, they have to look at their individual circumstance and decide when to get started. The reality is this is the same process that's been in place for a long time. It's just going to give the dealers a chance to actually capture their true retail rates. So I'd say if a dealer hasn't tackled this in a while, take a look at parts and labor. If you're doing this annually, make sure that you get the submission in for specifically for the brands that need to wait on July 1st, because any date after that, it's just lost profit. The dealership can't recover.
And from your perspectives, what's the number one thing that dealers should know? Even if it's Ann, let's take a minute to commemorate what was a legislative win on behalf of Dealers for Virginia. But what is it for this group? What's that one thing? What's your take home for people as it relates to the new protections that are in place or will be in place?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing from our perspective is using this as an opportunity to get your fair reimbursement, but recognizing that you don't want to do anything that approaches, some sort of fraudulent manipulation of this scenario now. So we want to make sure that dealers are getting paid fairly, but we also used a lot of political capital to get this in place. We had manufacturers telling horror stories of the way dealers would abuse this. So let's just not make any of those stories true, so that we're not back down there next year saying, our bad. Yeah, this didn't go quite the way we thought it should. So just keep in mind that you're entitled to get your fair reimbursement as determined by the statute. You have friends out there at Armatus that can help you with this, and that is how the statute should be used.
And Jordan and Ryan, anything from your side of just that number one thing, or even if it's resources available to dealers, where do you recommend starting?
I would just say, from my perspective, Dan, it's all about the techs, right? And Ann mentioned it, getting them paid fairly, recruiting, training them. It's kind of the end result of all that hard work is it hits home there. So it's all about the techs, and in terms of resources, even if you're not one of our clients, if you're running into any situations right now with your submissions, for any state that we're endorsed in, we're happy to help. So if you'd like to send us an issue you have with your manufacturer and warranty reimbursement, we'll give you an honest opinion whether you're a client or not.
And I think just don't wait, right? July 1st is right around the corner. And starting that process now, whether it be internally or reaching out to an external resource, external vendor, don't wait and take advantage of this change in the law.
And I know I promised this to be one final question, but we love putting additional on just to keep everybody on their toes. And one thing that occurred to me when Ann was speaking, and actually being there on Dealer Day on the Hill and seeing you, Jordan, and Ryan as part of that process, and really just ingrained with the team, and even coming on a prior segment of VADA Live here now. When you think about kind of having that national scope and scale, how others may have done this or encountering or different stages, what do you think was it about Virginia and VADA that stands out to you in this effort? And it's a bit of an awkward question, but would love to hear what was really done by this team. What really stood out to you as unique? Having the fortunate opportunity now of saying, yes, this is something going into effect. This is real. This is a success case for all intents and purposes.
I think it was personally, I've assisted 21 states with their legislation, and how Dealer Day was handled, the amount of people that were brought from dealers to service personnel. I mean, the fixed ops directors, service managers, people in parts. I think that unified message really made a big difference, because it brought it down to what the real issue is here. So, I think that just having that unified message, not just having it be folks with the association or experts in the area, and when the manufacturers came and told some half truths, we'll say, about certain things, we had the techs and people like that could refute those items. So I think that was really unique with Virginia, and also the measured approach, where some people are trying to get lots and lots of things into the law, and Virginia said this is a very specific problem that needs to be solved, and by hyper focusing on it, they solved it the whole way here in one session. So that would be my opinion on it.
And I will commit to making that the final question. I appreciate this panel. I was joined by Ann Gambardella, VADA, Jordan Jankowski, and Ryan Hammer at Armatus Dealer Uplift. Armatus is a VADA program partner. Thanks for watching this edition of VADA Live. I'm Dan Carrigan. See you next time.